Hey everyone, welcome to this weekly Sidereal Astrology forecast for the week of July 28th through August 3rd of 2025. All right, so this week we have a continuation of the new moon that started last week in Cancer. This is a new beginning to the lunar month, and this early part of the week will be still just building some momentum in that and starting to plant new seeds for the new beginning. We will enter the action phase and the manifestation phase of the lunar month, probably more so around Friday, Saturday, once we enter into the first quarter moon, which is a much more implementing, again, manifesting time of the cycle. And there it's just generally good to implement and, again, challenge ourselves to move that new energy forward. So with that, we do have Chiron going retrograde this week on Wednesday. Happens every year for 6 months. And so just a good time to be a bit reflective on perhaps some of the internal healing. Any type of healing, really, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, whatever it might be for you. More internally, though, typically this will, in many cases, put a little bit of a break on some of that stuff, but helps us to then rework it or do it more in an internal process. Wednesday is also the same time that Venus will go into Gemini, and so a shift of values. And here, coming from more grounded Taurus, we'll likely see a shift towards more of the enjoyment and connection in the realm of communication, in the realm of learning, and generally exchanging with others. Thursday marks the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde with Mercury over the Sun, and so there could be some shifts of perspective here. Usually a good time to go again inward to become aware of perhaps some new perspectives, as this can perhaps challenge the energy a little bit, but usually some positive steps in the right direction. And then the last important aspect of the week will be on Friday, again, when we start to really implement things. We'll also have Venus squaring up to Saturn and Neptune. So we've had this Saturn and Neptune conjunction in Pisces, really helping us see what we can be building that's soul aligned and perhaps work on mental health and spiritual health. And Venus, the planet of connection and relationships, in a bit of a challenge here, helping us integrate that energy. And again, taking action towards that can make it very constructive. All right, so let's go and take a look at all of this here in more detail when we return. Alrighty, so here's the sky for this week. We're going to look at this for each day of the week, starting first with Monday, July 28th. And as you can see here, we are using the visible sky on this channel, which is very different from mainstream astrology. You won't see this in mainstream because, unfortunately, they don't use the visible sky anymore. And so the signs are different. The sign placements are different as well, such as perhaps you were expecting me to say that that new moon was in Leo or that the sun is in Leo right now. But if you do look up at the visible sky, you will see the sun right in the middle of Cancer. So if you are new to this, definitely check out that link down below for more information. Okay, let's do a little bit of a recap since we do have some sign changes with Venus here this week. So coming into the week, we've got, again, the whole lunar cycle of Cancer, the sun in Cancer, Mercury retrograde in Cancer as well. So the theme really is on focusing on creating that safe and secure environment for ourselves and others. It's a great time to be connecting to our emotions, feelings, perhaps reflecting on the past or connecting to our roots in some way. Again, themes around security, which can be spending time with personal relationships, family-like relationships, maybe even at home or in that more secure setting. And practicing self-care and self-nurturance is always really good too. So it's all about caring and protecting for ourselves and others, and this is what this whole lunar cycle is certainly about. Mercury retrograde is helping us perhaps reconnect to these parts of ourselves and perhaps even communicate or think about things in a way that's a bit different than before in this realm. And also, if there are some things that are in this personal life realm that you do feel like it's good to go back and reconsider, reflect on, or maybe go back and redo or reconnect to, it is a fantastic time to do that during Mercury retrograde here. And Mercury retrograde is a great time to be curious and learning, just being a bit flexible as things do tend to shift, but we can actually implement a lot, especially if it's, again, something from before or something we're redoing. Now, Venus is finishing Taurus this week, getting closer to Gemini here around Wednesday. So Venus has been in a very good position in Taurus, her home ruled sign, her domicile. And so this has been a good time to be connecting to the more grounded elements of life and also connecting to our relationships in a more grounded way. So this is still good this week, but as the week unfolds, as we'll see, it'll benefit more of that curiosity and interest of Gemini. And so a good time to start to enjoy a bit of communication, maybe a bit of mental energy, whether it's for ourselves personally or interpersonally. All of that is great. Gemini is all about exchanging, whether it's the internal processes of like the mind, such as through learning, writing, things like this, or externally, sometimes through exchanging with others. Now, Mars has recently shifted into Virgo, just basically last Sunday, so just coming into this week. And so a new way of taking action, and less themes around self-expression right now, like it's been with Mars and Leo, and more now in the realm of refinement and striving towards some kind of structure. So Mars in Virgo wants to create structure in our life, wants to approach things in a more methodical an improvement-oriented way when it comes to our actions and the things that we're pursuing right now. So we do have actually quite a bit of yin energy coming into the week, yin being more receiving type of energy. That's with the Venus in Taurus, again, more earth and grounded. Cancer's yin, internal, more emotional or water-based. And even Virgo is about creating structure, also an earth energy there as well. As the week unfolds, we'll get more of that Gemini. Jupiter is already expanding Gemini, so there's certainly some air already there, but Venus will certainly be adding to that the later part of the week, increasing the energies around, again, the mental and communicative side of things. So let's go ahead and break down the week here one day at a time. Again, coming into the week, we are in the early phases of the lunar cycle. It's good to just be slowly building some momentum and just sort of figuring things out. The moon will be shifting from Leo into Virgo on Monday. And so the week sort of starts with this shift into the Virgo energies. And so while the first half might be still about that self-expression, certainly as the day unfolds and certainly as the week unfolds, more in terms of that improvement orientation. So Mars will be activated, Virgo will be activated here all the way up until Friday. The moon will be in Virgo. And so it's a great week here for improvement, refinement, striving towards perfection, getting into the details of things and creating structure. And as I always say, it's a great way of working with Virgo is to focus on what we do have control over, which is, of course, ourselves, our personal development, how we respond to things, and oftentimes just a good time to get involved with routine, work, service, things of that more improvement oriented level. So that's going to be the backdrop for really the bulk of the week there with Moon and Virgo. Venus will be sextiling up to Chiron on Monday, very minor here, but if there is an opportunity here for a little bit of healing, it could be supportive. It could come through in the realm of self-worth and self-value with Venus being Venus and also Venus being in Taurus, but it can also come through in relationships too. So it's really nothing major. It's just there's an opening perhaps, and an opening to perhaps connect to the healing world in some way, which can end up being quite healing to that self-worth or those relationships if we choose to utilize it. Tuesday will be mostly just that moon in Virgo. As we do get into Wednesday, Chiron will be slowing down for his retrograde. This is really nothing major unless you got Chiron very dominant in your transits right now, such as over a major planet like the sun, moon, or ascendant angle, or Chiron's very dominant in your chart in general. But generally speaking, it happens every year. It's a time to now reflect on and internalize a little bit more of the healing energy. So whatever you've been doing the past 6 months in the realm of healing, in the realm of perhaps connecting to that these wounds that Chiron can bring up. So this could be psychological, emotional, physical, or spiritual. If there's been anything heavy like that, usually the retrograde can put a little bit of a break on some of that. So the next 6 months, we could notice that stuff kind of cooling off if it's been very strong for you the past 6 months. But here it's a great time to internalize the process, reflect a little bit more on healing if that's been prominent for you, if that's something you want to do. Chiron's not a major planet, so it's not something we're all forced into or anything like that. It's really something that if it's been a major theme already lately, or if you choose to work with it, but internalizing it, right? So reflecting on what we can do for healing, taking a little break, approaching it a little bit differently, trying things in a way that we hadn't tried before, going back and maybe healing some things from the past or that we were healing before, and now we can go back and redo. So just a bit of a shift with this around Wednesday. And again, if Chiron's prominent for you, there can be a noticeable shift of that more internalized process on Wednesday specifically. But usually this is a very subtle process that takes its time in its to slowly build that momentum to go retrograde. Now, once we do get to Thursday here, again, main theme still around Virgo, still around improvement. We will have, like I said, Venus shifting into Gemini once we get to really later part of Wednesday, but we could say officially once we get to Thursday. So this will be, again, more connection in the mental and communicative worlds, more connection in terms of wanting to maybe enjoy that book, maybe do some writing, maybe exchange with others a little bit more, maybe connect with our peers, maybe neighbors, maybe siblings, connecting to those of equal status, basically. And again, Jupiter's already been expanding this lately for the past recent months. And so it's been a great time to be learning and being more open to learning and being practical and using our minds and communication and all this type of stuff. But Venus here can help us enjoy it, help us see the value of it, and help us connect in that way with our one-to-one connections, whether they're, deeper relationships that we already have or just the surface everyday kind of social relationships also. This also marks the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde on Thursday. This will be with Mercury over the sun here. So this is not the most challenged Mercury here. I mean, if Mercury is direct over the sun, this is much more challenged. It's a much more what the Hindus call combust energy, where the sun tends to drown out a lot of the Mercury energy and can be difficult sometimes to think or communicate. There's a little bit of that only because, again, still we don't see Mercury visibly in the sky when he's over the sun like this. So still being mindful and conscious of the mental processes and the communicative processes. Not because anything bad's going to happen. It's a much better way of working with it because then it tends to flow. We get a little bit more clarity. And that's really what this is about. It's really that Mercury is at its closest point to Earth during this particular position. Retrograde, he's close to Earth, and then when he's in front of the sun from our vantage point, he's closest to Earth. So this really amplifies the Mercury energy. Now, because Mercury's retrograde, again, it's still internal, it's still reflective. This is what the Greeks called Mercury sort of going into the underworld to pull up information from the gods and now give it to us. But the way that Mercury gives it to us here is, again, with the retrograde, is again in a way that's a little more internal. So it's a really good time to still be, again, learning, curious, interested, especially with that Venus in Gemini, but to, again, perhaps have it be a little more of a internal or spiritual process, right? To allow the unconscious mind to communicate to us, allow our soul to communicate to us, to our intuition, things like this. And in this way, just then being a little more mindful of what we're communicating, what we're going about in our day-to-day life, and then there's a great connection with that. So great time to connect with the more internal processes of the mind and communication, reconnect with that so that we do gain clarity, so we do gain insight, so we do gain a new perspective, and this is all very likely during this kind of conjunction. The halfway point of the retrograde, usually something shifts, something clicks, not usually very clear and mental just yet, but something that definitely starts to realign, and we can start to work with that energy much easier. The second half of the retrogrades are always much easier than the first half because by this point we've acclimated to it, and in this case Mercury has really communicated or connected to us in the way that he's intending. So this is Thursday, very strong here with this kind of energy, great things to be aware of and to work with, again, intentionally and constructively. Once we do get to the Friday time period, we do have that Venus squaring up to Saturn and Neptune. So we've had that Saturn and Neptune conjunction that we've been talking a lot about lately. And it's really an energy that's really about next year. Really March of next year is really when it gets activated. And this is all about this building of this life that's more soul aligned and also better for our mental health and spiritual health. It tends to dissolve the energies when it comes to what we're building, and it can be a little bit difficult to work with when it comes to being clear on what we want and what we're building. There is that dissolving energy of Neptune, most certainly. But this is something that, again, is for us to then connect more internal and to our soul about, again, have more soul-aligned energy in our life in general. So there's a little bit of a clash with this week only because it's a square. But again, squares are very constructive. And so here it's about seeing the value of this with Venus squaring up to it, seeing how we can perhaps even implement some of this into our relationships. So while our enjoyments and connections might be a bit serious with the square to Saturn and a bit uncertain with the square to Neptune, how can we integrate this is really the name of the game. So intentionally having some patience some discipline with the Saturn side, and some willingness to trust in life, willingness to trust our intuition and our soul with the Neptune side of it. Usually the squares do tend towards over and under extremes collectively, so we might feel a bit heavy or dense with the square to Saturn, maybe apathetic in some way. With the square to Neptune, maybe feeling disillusioned or uncertain, or like escaping. So if those tendencies do come up, and again, it's not a given that they will come up for everybody, of course not, but that's the kind of collective energy we're working with. So in this way, if we can channel it, that's what it's all about. It's the best way of working with this. So again, patience, responsibility in those enjoyments, in those connections, and willingness to have faith and trust in life and be in the present moment and have this soul connection to our enjoyments and our relationships, right? Intentional, constructive, that's the square. That's how we can best work with it. That's how we really build this energy. And in this way, it all becomes very, very integrated and developed. Okay, so that's really just concentrated there around Friday. Again, can be very constructive there. As we do get to the weekend here, the moon finishing up Virgo there on Friday, going into Libra for later Friday and all day Saturday. This can place some themes around balance, fairness, and ethics. And so doing the right thing and bringing things back into balance in our life can be great. This is always good with Venus anyways. So by this point, I think coming off of those squares, especially once we get to Friday, I think feeling much more integrated with the willingness to connect to things, to people, and to do what's right, and to have more balance in our life in general. Now, this is also the same part of the lunar cycle where we are in the first quarter moon. So I will say that Friday and Saturday is the action phase of the week, or really of the month. And anything that started to come into your sphere of awareness last week, really good to challenge yourself and really implement. And again, likely us noticing some things manifesting for the month, Friday and Saturday. Now, once we do get to Sunday, the moon will be in Scorpio. And so just a good day there for some depth, some deeper energy, and bringing some deep things to the surface for really becoming aware of them, and then perhaps healing them once we get into Monday, as Monday will then have the moon in Ophiuchus. Okay, but that's very much in the background. So let's go and distill this. I've talked about a lot of things here, but let's keep it very simple because it is actually quite a straightforward week. It's a week of implementing new beginnings from last week's new moon in Cancer. Okay, it's a week of developing more of that caring, protective, nurturing side for ourselves and others. Being a bit reflective with this, with the Mercury retrograde, reconsidering, reconnecting is absolutely fantastic right now. This marks the halfway point midweek on Thursday, and so perhaps some new shifts of perspective around this. Really just general energy of our perspective on life, but very likely about care, protection, security, right? Who and what's important to us on an intrinsic level, how important it is to care and nurture for ourselves, these kinds of things, with all of this, of course, being in Cancer. This is also on Thursday, but really Friday and Saturday marks the action phase of the lunar cycle. That's where, again, we can really implement this stuff, okay? Definitely the Cancer side of things, but really anything that has come into your sphere of awareness, anything you've wanted to develop this month since the new moon last week. Okay, so those are the most important things. As a side note to that, yes, we have Chiron going retrograde. There can be some more internalization with some of the healing. Yes, we have Venus squaring up to Saturn and Neptune, only really around Friday. So challenging ourselves on that day in regards to a little bit of patience and long-term view, and a willingness to have a bit of acceptance and trust in our intuition and life, or God, or source, or whatever your philosophy is there, but to the greater energies of life. In this way, that becomes very constructive, and we can see that, again, Friday and Saturday can be very constructive phase of the week. And all this with Venus getting closer to Gemini, so the later part of the week, a little bit of curiosity can be enjoyable, especially in those personal relationships as well. All right, so everyone have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for the live stream. We go live here every Sunday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. There's a link down below for that if you're on YouTube. Hit the notification bell, in fact, if you're on YouTube, so you can be notified of these videos as well as those live streams that we do go live with. But most of you are watching from the newsletter. If you're not yet signed up to the newsletter, definitely do so. Again, down below, if you're on YouTube, you do get these videos updated immediately, straight to your inbox, as well as other articles and very important information for the true sidereal community like when we update the boundaries like we did last week. But anyways, hope to see you at the live stream, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Take care. Bye-bye.